guys, I hope you guys are having a good day today. We are going to continue reading Black Beauty, and we are on chapter 23. In our last reading, we read chapter 22, and in this chapter, John Manley takes Ginger and Black Beauty to their new home at Earlshall Park. He tells the coachman, Mr. York, about their behavior, and they have to wear bearing range, which they both really dislike. So that's pretty much what happened in the last chapter. Today we're going to read chapter 23, which is called A Strike for Liberty. Okay, so we're going to read this chapter together and then talk about some things that happen and take notes on this chapter afterwards. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 23, A Strike for Liberty. One day my lady came down later than usual, and the silk rustled more than ever. "Drive to the Duchess of B," she said, and then after a pause, "Are you never going to get the horses' heads up, York? Race them at once and let us have no more of this humoring and nonsense." York came to me first, while the groom stood at Ginger's head. He drew my head back and fixed the reins so tight that it was almost intolerable, which means he almost, he could not stand it, basically. It's so painful that he just cannot stand it. Then he went to Ginger, who was impatiently jerking her head up and down against the bit, as was her way now. She had a good idea of what was coming, and the moment York took the rein off the terret in order to shorten it, she took her opportunity and reared up so suddenly that York had his nose roughly hit and his hat knocked off. The groom was nearly thrown off his legs. At once they both flew to her head, but she was a match for them and went on plunging, rearing, and kicking in a most desperate manner. At last she kicked right over the carriage pole and fell down, after giving me a severe blow to my near quarter. There was no knowing what further mischief she might have done had not York promptly sat himself down flat on her head to prevent her struggling, at the same time calling out, "Unbuckle the black horse, run for the winch and unscrew the carriage pole. Cut the trace here, somebody, if you can't unhitch it." One of the footmen ran for the winch, and another brought a knife from the house. The groom soon set me free from Ginger and the carriage, and led me to my box. He just turned me in as I was, and ran back to York. I was much excited by what had happened, and if I had ever been used to kick or rear, I am sure I should have done it then. But I never had, and there I stood, angry, sore in my leg, my head still strained up to the terret on the saddle, and no power to get it down. I was very miserable and felt much inclined to kick the first person who came near me. Before long, however, Ginger was led in by two grooms, a good deal knocked about and bruised. York came with her and gave his orders, and then came to look at me. In a moment he let down my head. "Confound these check reins," he said to himself. "I thought we should have some mischief soon. Master will be sorely vexed. But there, if a woman's husband can't rule her, of course a servant can't. So I wash my hands of it, and if she can't get to the Duchess's garden party, I can't help it." York did not say this before the men. He always spoke respectfully when they were by. Now he felt me all over and soon found the place above my hock where I had been kicked. It was swelled and painful. He ordered it to be sponged with hot water, and then some lotion was put on. Lord W. was much put out when he learned what had happened. He blamed York for giving way to his mistress, to which he replied that in future he would much prefer to receive his orders only from his lordship. But I think nothing came of it, for things went on the same as before. I thought York might have stood up better for his horses, but perhaps I am no judge. Ginger was never put into the carriage again, but when she was well of her bruises, one of the Lord W.'s younger sons said he should like to have her. He was sure she would make a good hunter. As for me, I was obliged still to go in the carriage, and had a fresh partner called Max. He always had been used to the tight rein. I asked him how it was he bore it. "Well," he said, "I bear it because I must, but it is shortening my life, and it will shorten yours too if you have to stick to it." "Do you think," I said, "that our masters know how bad it is for us?" "I can't say," he replied, "but the dealers and the horse doctors know it very well. I was at a dealer's once who was training me and another horse to go as a pair. He was getting our heads up, as he said, a little higher and a little higher every day. A gentleman who was there asked him why he did so. Because, said he, people won't buy them unless we do. The London people always want their horses to carry their heads high and to step high. Of course, it is very bad for the horses, but then it is good for trade. The horses soon wear up or get diseased, and they come for another pair. That, said Max, is what he said in my hearing, and you can judge for yourself. What I suffered with that rain for 4 long months in my lady's carriage, it would be hard to describe, but I am quite sure that, had it lasted much longer, either my health or my temper would have given way. Before that, I never knew what it was to foam at the mouth, but now the action of the sharp bit on my tongue and jaw, and the constrained position of my head and throat always caused me to froth at the mouth more or less. Some people think it very fine to see this and say, "What fine-spirited creature!" But it is just unnatural for horses as for men to foam at the mouth. It is a sure sign of some discomfort and should be attended to. Besides this, there was a pressure on my windpipe which often made my breathing very uncomfortable. And when I returned from my work, my neck and chest were strained and painful, my mouth and tongue tender, and I felt worn and depressed. In my old home, I always knew that John and my master were my friends, but here, although in many ways I was well treated, I had no friend. York might have known, and very likely did know, how that rain harassed me, but I suppose he took it as a matter of course that it could not be helped. At any rate, nothing was done to relieve me. And so let's think about this chapter. So at the beginning of this chapter, Ginger gets really upset. I want you to think about why she was so upset. The reason why she was so upset is because they were again trying to put the bearing rein on them and pull their heads back, and it hurt them, and Ginger was just not going to have that. So she kind of threw a little bit of a fit, and you saw that it actually got her out of having to wear that bearing rein. What do you think York thinks of the bearing rein? Okay, at one part, I'm going to scroll up. Okay, so right here it says, "Confound these check reins," he said to himself. "I thought we should have some mischief soon. Master will be sorely vexed. But there, if a woman's husband can't rule her, of course a servant can't. So I wash my hands of it, and if she can't get to the Duchess's garden party, I can't help it." Okay, so it kind of seems like York doesn't really like the bearing reins. Okay, so he's saying confound these check reins. Seems like he doesn't like them. I think earlier he even mentioned how it hurt the horses. So it seems like he does not like the bearing reins. Okay, so why do you think he continues to have them use these harnesses even though they are painful? Again, right here, he's just following his master's orders. And if he were to go against his master, then he may get in trouble. So that's probably the reason why he is going along with these orders, even though he doesn't really like the bearing reins. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and switch over to some note taking. Let's see if I can get my camera switched over. Here we go. There's notes from chapter 22. We're going to go ahead and take some notes for chapter 23, and you guys should all be doing this. So remember, the first thing that we're going to write down in our notes is the plot. So the plot is just a short summary of what happened in this chapter. Okay? All right, so basically what happens in this chapter is that Ginger fights back against the bearing reins, and York knows that the reins are bad for horses, but they are using the bearing reins because it's the style in London, and that's what his masters are telling him to do, so that's why he's using those. All right, so we're going to write that down. Ginger fights back against the bearing reins. York knows that the reins are bad for horses. But they are used because it is the style in London. Okay, so that's basically what happens in this chapter. The next thing that we're going to write down are some of the characters that were introduced. We already know who York is, and we already know who Ginger and Black Beauty are. A new character that we have not been introduced yet is Max, which is another horse at Earlshall Park. This is Max, which is another horse at Earlshall Park. Okay. So remember, you are supposed to be writing these notes down. So make sure that when you're watching these videos that you have a piece of paper to record this information. And if you ever need to just pause the video to get it all written down, go ahead and do that, because you can definitely pause that. Next time we will be reading chapter 24, so I'll see you again then.